Okay, let me start out this by saying I haven't rehearsed this. This is totally on the fly, so it might get a little erratic and crazy. I want to mention that today is November 16th, 2020, and this all relates to the services that I've had done at University of Michigan School of Dentistry over the last 3 years. I went in a long story short, I was having my bite opened and 6 implants. The reason I'm making this video today is because I just received a phone call from the university because I terminated their services and have chosen to get my work done elsewhere, with the acknowledgement of one of the staff members there. I don't know her last name and I won't give her first name because this is public stuff, even though nobody there has earned my respect in any way. But today I received the phone call with their determination on whether or not to give me the materials that I've paid for or reimburse me for what I've paid. And what they've decided to do is keep the materials, make me pay them for them, and reimburse me. I paid money in advance, so to sum that up, I gave them a $5,000 deposit for $12,000 and some change worth of work. The lab fees that were done so far were over $4,000. I don't know the exact numbers. They said they're going to send me a check for $800 and some change, and keep the rest. Make me pay them for the work done, but not turn over the materials to me. And but that's only part of what this video is about. The real story goes back to the first surgery that I had for the implants. I was under anesthesia, and they were doing a sinus lift and 2 implants at the same time. And they screwed up. I had another tooth which had moved and was on an angle, and it was actually in the way of putting in, and let me give you some tooth numbers so that you can follow it, and I can kind of keep it straight. Tooth number 2 no longer had a tooth below it for many years, so it had fallen down and moved forward, and it covered the space where tooth number 3 used to be, and that's where one of the implants was going, in spot number 3. But because they had to do a sinus lift, I was under anesthesia when they did it, and they should have removed tooth number 2 first and let it heal or do whatever, and then scheduled the implant surgery. They made the mistake and they didn't do that. Well, I didn't know, okay? And I didn't find out the truth until about a month and a half ago. Maybe not even that long. So either way, so while I was knocked out and they couldn't talk to me and ask me, what do we do, what do you want to do? When they discovered the mistake, instead of halting the surgery and putting it off till later and maybe even pulling that tooth, because we had scheduled to pull it anyway. That's what they should have done, pulled that tooth and been done with it. They put the implant in on the same angle as the tooth that had moved and it was not straight. So now they've just moved the problem of tooth number 2 being in the way of tooth number 3 to where now tooth number 3 is in the way of tooth number 4, and they forced me to pull my tooth. And we went around and around over that, because I'd already been in there and had $11,000 worth of work done at this point, when all of a sudden they're telling me now we got to pull a tooth that originally we were going to save. I went to another dentist and got a second opinion, and he didn't tell me anything about tooth number 3 was going to interfere with tooth number 4 and it had to come out. He just evaluated the tooth for a tooth evaluation, whether or not it was a savable tooth. And he said, sure, there's fine. He took an x-ray, put the x-ray up on the screen, and he pointed to this and that feature, and he explained it. He says, yeah, this is fine, this is fine, this is fine. Yeah, there's no reason why you can't save that tooth. Although he didn't tell me that tooth number 3 was going to hit it, and neither did the school. And the problem came up is when I first learned that they wanted to pull that tooth. And I said, plus, not only that, now here's another thing. This is why this story isn't planned, so I'm going to get a little erratic. But now I've lost total place of where I was going. Let me see if I can pause this for a second here. Let's go. Okay, brain cramp is over, I think. Now, during the course of my treatment, the original attending physician student, this is in graduate student dentistry. This isn't the beginner stuff. These guys are already doctors. But my doctor finished his internship, or whatever you call what they do after the fact, and he left, and I got a new guy. Now, my original quote for all the work I was having done was $21,500. None of these dollar figures are going to be exact to the penny, or the dollar plus or minus 500 bucks when I give them, in case anybody wants to whine about it. So I get a new guy. Now, I've already had $11,000 worth of his work done, and he does a reevaluation, treats me as a new patient like nobody at the school's ever seen me before, because they gotta do that as part of their training. I understand that. And it gives me an estimate at the end of the day, and it's $25,000. Well, I'm thinking it's $25,000 for all the work that they're doing at that moment anyway, because I just been there for like 5 hours. So anyway, I was tired and want to go home. And I'm on my way home, and I'm thinking, well, I wonder if that's $25,000 total or $25,000 on top of what I've already had done. So I called the office back and I asked them that question. And they immediately start sidestepping me and saying, well, I'm not sure, so I don't want to answer wrong. Well, the truth is, they were sure. They're the people that do all the money, and they know exactly what I owe for what every time I go into the office. They're the people I pay. They're the people that in part schedule the visits. Anyway, whatever they do. So I'm talking to this girl, and I said, well, I don't know why. I want to know why Plan B is $25,000 when Plan A was only $21,500. And I want to know the answer to my question, because it would turn it into $36,000 total instead of $21,000 total. And I couldn't get an answer out of her. So I said, well, look, I don't care. I don't know what he's changed, but we're not doing Plan B. I'm the patient. I'm paying for this services. I'm telling you what you can and can't do to me, and I'm saying we're going to go back to Plan A, because that's what I want. Anyway. So actually, that might have been a little skewed. I mean, a little goofy. The order is a little mixed up, and when I gathered information, when I actually made that statement, I think I actually made it after what I'm going to tell you next happened. I think at that particular time I just settled for no answer, and I asked for the doctor to call me. And I waited a day and a half. I waited all the next day and didn't get a phone call. And then the day after that, I called sometime after noon, I think. And as soon as she answered the phone, she must have caller ID. She knew it was me, and she says, "Oh, the doctor hasn't called you yet?" Because I didn't even say who I was. And she hadn't forgotten what the conversation was supposed to be about. And I said, "No." She says, "Well, I'll make sure he calls you right away." And the doctor never did call me. But at that conversation, that's when I said, because she'd already got clearance from her superiors to go ahead and tell me that the total price had just gone up by $11,000. So she told me that, and then on that day, not on the first conversation, and then and that's when I said, we're going back to Plan A, no Plan B. Sorry. And that ended our conversation for the most part that I can remember, at least at this point. And I say again, I didn't plan this video. I'm making it because of what happened today, and it's time for some kind of action. Who knows what? I've talked to attorneys about this, and there's not enough money in it for anybody to take it on a pay-if-you-win basis. In other words, there's not 100,000 grand coming to anybody. I do have a lawsuit, but one where I would only have to probably sue the dentist and take the money I won and give it to the attorney, and that's kind of pointless. And they all know that. It's rigged. The whole system is planned out just so they can do that. Now, my main complaint, among others, today is they waited till today to give me the information that inspired me to make this video, because today is the cancellation date of the statute of limitations. It's 2 years. Today is November 16th, 2020. The mistake they made was on November 16th, 2018. At least for all practical purposes, I can no longer sue them over the screw-up. Although, who knows, because I know there are exceptions to the rule, and COVID-19 may well be one of those exceptions. That's another story in general. But either way, so when I get a then after I tell the girl that I want to go back to Plan A, and our conversation is over, a few hours later I get a call from some man in administration there. I don't remember his name. We talked for about an hour about what they were going to do, and tried to whittle away at the plan as to let's cut some of these extra costs. The extra $11,000 isn't there, okay? So we got all the way down to the nitty-gritty of a few things, and they wanted to re-crown every tooth in my mouth that had a crown. And I said to the guy, I said, there's nothing wrong with the other crowns. Why do you want to redo all those crowns? And his answer to me was, well, because, if we don't, then the colors might not match. The new crowns to the old crowns. And I said, well, they're back teeth that you want to re-crown. Nobody can see that anyway. And then on top of that, for the color argument, in one of our conversations, when the doctor asked me what kind of crown do you want on it, we can do a porcelain crown or we can do a semi-metal crown, where the top of the crown would have been metal. So it's not like nobody would see that if I didn't laugh really loud. So what would be the point in redoing the crowns to match metal? Anyway, you get my point. So I said to the guy, I said, you don't redo every crown in my mouth in case the color doesn't match. You do the new crowns first, and then if the color doesn't match, then you do the other ones if I think it's a big enough deal with the color match. He says, oh no, you can't do that. It has to be made out of the same lot of material that the first ones were made out of. So I said, well, that's not a problem that's hard to solve. You just set aside enough material to do the other crowns if they need it until we find out whether or not we're going to do them, and then you don't. And he said, well, they can't do that either. And I told him he was full of shit, and that's when he hung up on me. Then, within a day or two, I get a call, and they tell me that I have to come in and have a meeting with the administrator. Her name is Nevin or something like that. So I go in to this meeting with this doctor, and it's her, the girl that I just got off the phone with today, and my attending physician, all in this meeting. My girlfriend went with me, so I had somebody to listen in. And we got around to the subject of pulling tooth number 4, which had nothing to do with it, had nothing wrong with it. At this time, I hadn't had a second opinion. We hadn't even discussed it with anybody yet. And so I said, you know, at this time it had been 2 years since I've started treatment. This was sometime last year. And I said, it's now been a year since they made the mistake, and I was totally unaware of it. And I was still unaware of the actual mistake until just recently. But anyway. So I said, why do we got to pull this tooth? We didn't have to pull it 2 years ago when we made the initial examination. Why do we have to pull it now? And her answer was, she says, various reasons. So I said, various reasons is not an answer. And then she says, well, there's this thing called occlusion. Well, occlusion is how your teeth meet when your jaw closes, because it doesn't go up and down like this, it goes up like this. But that's got nothing to do with some reason to have to pull a tooth. They tell me every time I go to the dentist, if they have to put in one implant, they got to pull all my other teeth and do them all at the same time so they can get the occlusion right. Come on. That's bullshit, and everybody knows it. And I recognized it while we're in the office now. I'm not a dentist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not knowledgeable in medical terminology, and she can run circles around me with bullshit all day long, and we'll get nowhere. So for the time being, and on top of that, and she said, you know, if you don't want to pull that tooth, then you're going to have to go somewhere else. We're not going to finish the work. So I didn't have time to come up with a good answer in that meeting, so I agreed to pull the tooth. And they scheduled to pull the tooth at the same time as I was having some other work done a week or so later. I didn't know that it was scheduled for that day when I went in, but while I was there, and what they were doing on that appointment was pulling that tooth number 4, because it was in the way. They might have also pulled tooth number 2 that day. I don't remember. I might have already had tooth number 2 out at this point. But I'd had implants done on 28 and 30, I believe, is the tooth numbers. But they had to be exposed. They had been closed up to heal, and now it was time to put the healing abutments in. So they were going to expose those implants and put the healing abutments in and pull tooth number 4 that day. But before he started on any of the work, I said to him, I go, because I'd been thinking about it, I go, you know, I really don't want to pull tooth number 4. Tooth number 4 was the back end of a previous bridge, and replacing tooth number 5 and tooth number 3 with crowns eliminated a bridge. I wouldn't have to have a bridge anymore, and I thought that was awesome. Now, pulling tooth number 4, now it's going to create, or I got to have a bridge. Or at least, that was the only possibility that they told me and that I could think of at that time, although there are other solutions would have been available had they not put that implant in on such an extreme angle that it interfered with putting a tooth in on number 4. So anyway, so while I'm in the dentist's chair, exposing these implants on the bottom on this side, or just before he started, I said, you know, I really, and he was a good guy, and I thought I could, and I still do, I could trust his opinion and everything, but I didn't get his opinion. He had to go ask. I said, you know, if we don't have to pull this tooth, I'd really like to not pull that tooth. Well, he says, let me go ask. So he goes, he leaves, and he comes back. You know, I gotta throw some names in here, no last names. He comes back with this girl who works there. She's in administration of some type, and her name is Lisa. I don't know her last name. Even if I did, I wouldn't put that on here. She's also the girl I talked to today, and the girl that's been kind of, when he came, she's the girl that came back with him after he inquired about whether or not I had to pull that tooth. Now, I didn't know then, but I do know now that she came back with him to make sure he didn't tell me the real reason why we couldn't pull that tooth. She was watching him, not me. Okay? So all he said to me, he says, no, we're going to have to pull that tooth. And we didn't. Next thing you know, I'm getting another phone call. Called back into the administrator's office. And the only subject that we talked about was pulling that tooth. And so after I got the phone call making me an appointment to come in and talk to the administrator, I made an appointment with an outside dentist to evaluate that tooth. And he did. And he took an x-ray and he put it up on the screen, and he, like I said earlier in this video, what he did. Okay. And so I get there, and she says, you got to pull that tooth. We're not going to put up with any more of this. And I said, what, are you telling me that I can't question my medical care? That's illegal or something? So so I asked her again. I said, why do we got to pull that tooth? And she said, various reasons. She must be the one that they get for all the problems, and she blah blah blahs to everybody. She's the expert liar in the group. And once again I told her, various reasons is not an answer. And then I said, while waiting to get into this meeting with you today, I made an appointment with another dentist. And I asked him if the tooth could be saved or not. And when he said it could be saved, he didn't say it could be saved for various reasons. He put an x-ray on a screen, and he pointed out the reasons why it could or could not be saved if there were issues with each area of the tooth that they evaluate to determine whether or not a tooth could be saved. And I expect that same kind of an answer from the doctor that is putting a gun to my head, forcing me to pull my tooth. And so then she rattles off some kind of other excuse for the reason why I needed to be pulled, but she didn't say occlusion this time. I wish I could, but I can't remember what she said, but it wasn't occlusion. And the reality of the fact is, if it was occlusion the first time, then it should be occlusion the second time, not something else. So I decide, you know what, I haven't had teeth in my mouth for 2 years. I'm swallowing my food whole. I don't know at this point if I even had any temporaries in. I don't think that I did, because they needed to get that tooth out of the way. I still had healing abutments on 6 teeth. Take 6 teeth out of your mouth, not to mention the other ones that were already missing that we're not replacing, and try to eat. They don't care. So I said, I thought, you know what, I got to let them pull a tooth or they're going to kick me out of here. And then I got to pay who knows what extra to have somebody else redo everything that they've done. I already can't afford what it's costing me now. So I said, all right, pull the tooth. So that they wouldn't pull the trigger on the gun that was pointed at my head. So the administrator, Nevin, or whatever last name starts with an N. I think her first name starts with an A. She's got 4 names all together in the middle, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, she tells the attending physician my student doctor, whatever you want to call him, to walk with me down to oral surgery to make the appointment to pull the tooth. And he does. And he's nice about it. And not that he should be anything but nice. The issue's not with him. He's a student. And you know what? I can guarantee you the same gun was being pointed at his head. And at the guy when I was in the chair when I mentioned it the first time when they were going to pull the tooth that day. They pointed a gun at his head too. They were going to have to go to another school. They weren't even going to get to graduate if they let this squeak out. So, when I get down to oral surgery, now let me tell you this before I even say that. You make an appointment at the dental school, University of Michigan, unless it's going to take a month, 6 weeks to get you in. It's never today. And if it's an emergency and it's today, it's never in their office. They have an emergency dentist that handles that somewhere else in the school. You might be in that department somewhere, but it wouldn't be your regular dentist. So, when I get to oral surgery, which is right around the corner, I think it's on the same floor, they said, we can get you in today in 45 minutes. What am I supposed to do? Say, no. So I did. So they got me in that day, and they pulled my tooth on that day. And they were as amateur as they could be. I almost choked on it twice. The girl dropped it in the back of my throat twice, and then on my shoulder and bounced across the floor when they get it out of my mouth. But that's a whole other story. But I would have to say, or I'm willing to believe, I have no proof or no reason to know, but that administrator made a call down to oral surgery while the doctor was walking me down, or even before, because I actually stayed in the room a little longer after she'd left. And she told them, you get that guy in there and you get his tooth pulled today. She's trying to cover up the mistake that they really made long enough to get past the lawsuit. And I believe that's why I didn't get a phone call today about their final decision, because they haven't told me anything. Nothing until today about, and they still haven't admitted to reasons why that I had to pull the tooth. Until today, because today is the statute of limitations running out on the normal lawsuit for this kind of thing, and they've been doing it all along. Once the conflict with the tooth came up, the only doctor in that hospital that was allowed to oversee my doctor's treatment of me was that administrator who was holding the gun to my head. And there was another time after we got past pulling the tooth and everything's healed, and he was putting he was either putting the implants or the temporary crowns and temporary bridges in the first time, or he was doing some repair work on them because they've broken several times through all this mess, because they're not designed for the period of time that it's taken them to get the work done. In part, if nothing else, because the only time I can get an appointment is when my doctor and that administrator are both scheduled to be at the school that same day. They would not let me come in with another doctor, and that I'm not guessing at that one. I was specifically told that by the girl that makes the appointments. We can't get you in unless both Dr. Nevin or whatever her name is also in on that day. So anyway, so they pull my tooth. I think I got past that. Later on, I'm back in the dentist chair. I again do believe he's doing repairs on some of the temporary dental work, because it's crap. You know, it's good for a week or two, but it's not good for months. It's been months, year and a half probably since they first put the temporaries in. Year for sure. And they've been repaired several times and replaced at least once. Anyway, so while I'm in the chair that day, I said to him, I was thinking, part of the reason I didn't want to pull that tooth, the main reason I didn't want to pull that tooth is I don't want a bridge. And the second reason I didn't want to pull that tooth was because if I decided to pull that tooth and put another implant in there so I still would not have a bridge, they have to pull the tooth and let it heal. Then they have to put an implant in and let it heal. And then they could do the teeth. And I've been without teeth in my mouth for far too long. I need teeth. I need to eat. I need to not choke on my food because it's half of it's still in my mouth, and the other one, just the other half that it's still attached to, is hanging down the middle of my throat because I can't chew efficiently. So, I could, now before I asked him the question, I told him, I says, now look, this is just between me and you. You don't have to go ask anybody else. I'm just asking you. And I asked the question. And I could see the fear come across his face. And I didn't know exactly why the fear was. I'm kind of putting the pieces. I mean, I knew that he didn't want me to know. But the reality of it was, his fear was, how does he answer the question with anything but the truth and make it sound convincing? And he knows how much trouble, possibly even getting kicked out of the school, if they catch him telling me the answer. And when I saw the fear coming across his face, I said, and I thought he was afraid because he had to go back and say something to management. And I said, no, you got to tell anybody else. This is just between me and you. I know the problem it'll cause if me questioning pulling my tooth comes up to the administration. I know that all hell will break loose. So, I said, is it possible, since we got all the temporaries in now, and this is a temporary bridge up here, is it possible to go ahead and do the permanent ones on the bottom here and the bottom here, and leave this one a temporary? Take it out, because the socket where the tooth was pulled has long been healed. So now the only healing time we have to wait for is an implant. So we take the temporary bridge out, put in an implant, sew it up and let it heal, put the temporary bridge back on as soon as it's not so tender I can't take it, let it all heal, and then take the temporary bridge out, never make a permanent bridge for that area, and then do 3 separate teeth. And there's no way to answer that question without the truth, other than just yes or no and with no explanation. But if you